Call this meeting of the Senate Energy and Utilities Policy and Finance Committee meeting to order. This is an interim hearing. A quorum is present. We will not be taking any voting. This is intentionally to continue to discuss the ECO bill, any amendments that may be under consideration. Ideally, I would still like to see if we can get something through the legislature during special session, though I don't think that there's a high probability of that based upon what we seem to be seeing through many different avenues of bills and issues that have come up in the last couple of weeks. So at this point, we'll turn it over to Senator Rarick for you to introduce your bill, as well as any additional commentary, any amendments or thoughts on amendments, and then we'll open it up to the wider general public and have a further discussion on that with members. So let's go with Senator Rarick first, and then we'll take testifiers, and then we'll come back to members. So Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate having yet another hearing on this as we continue to move forward. And I will try not to repeat things that we have talked about in committee before. Try to focus on some things that we maybe haven't touched on as much, and some of the things we've been working on. So I've continued to work with groups around the bill and getting input since session ended. And I will be presenting or having a bill drafted and submitted for special session. The basis of the language will be the language that we adopted in committee. I know because we never did have it heard in rules that that language was never engrossed and can maybe be difficult to find. But that is the basis, the language that the House passed, and then what we had in committee. There is one change that was going to be ready as an amendment on the Senate floor if we would have heard it. The basis of that amendment would be to call out some certain groups to be on the stakeholder group that the Commissioner of Commerce would have to bring in to review any SIP programs. And that was going to include a ratepayer group as well as delivered fuels. And then the other piece of that amendment is that the Department of Commerce will have to track any impacts that the SIP program is having on the delivered fuel industry, so that if we are in fact seeing the impacts that have been presented as possible, that the legislature could see that and make some changes. I had offered up what could be considered a click off option, that depending on what those impacts were, if it reached a certain point, that it would automatically click off the SIP program in regards to fuel switching. That was rejected, I guess could say, and so we never really had any discussions as to what level that should be at. So we did not include that portion into the bill. So I've, as I said, continued to work with groups. I've asked for other input or language. I have not received any other language that I could try to work with or incorporate into the bill. That's why you'll see it come forward as we last saw it in committee with those that one little change. I just want to remind everyone, one of the things that gets brought up is that the basis of this bill is around fuel switching, and that's not completely accurate. In fact, I don't believe this isn't the main focus of this bill is not to switch from one fuel to another. It is to make efficiencies on the grid, and it is to improve our conservation. So, one of the things that I had not focused on in the past but one of the big focuses of this bill is to allow for load shifting to count. So whether that is having your water heater be shut off during the day, this load management, or whether it is going to be things like allowing for storage as that becomes more and more prevalent, and as technologies bring that forward, to allow storage of some type during off-peak hours. I think that is the real key component to this bill and what we're trying to focus on with this. And that could be things like I said, heating water overnight. It could even be done cooling, building ice during overnight hours to be used for air conditioning purposes the next day. Battery storage as that technology comes forward, and this would goes a long way towards stopping what we call curtailment. We have a lot of energy sources that, when we're in low demand times, are shut down. We could continue to run those during off-peak times to build that storage so that we don't have to ramp other options up when we are in peak. That is the primary focus of the bill. When we do talk about the fuel switching, we are talking about looking at options. And I think one thing that gets lost a little bit, especially in new situations, you can look at the options and try to move from, if something was planned, and you can find new technologies, including fuels such as natural gas or propane, that can be counted towards electric utilities SIP. So, it can go both ways. You can count both, and this bill continues that process. So, again, the innovative clean technologies piece, that is really looking forward as new technologies are developed. How can we incorporate them? And we're trying to look forward to say, instead of the legislature having to come back every time something new is developed and redo it through the program, we're trying to look forward and be proactive instead of always being reactive. So I will, again, most of the bill we've heard many, many times, so I would be open to having other testifiers bring forward their points. If other members had some amendments that they had thought about or some ideas, I'd be open to listen to that, and I can answer any questions after all of that as well. So thank you.
Okay, we do have a list right now, so we'll go through the testifiers list and then take any additional testifiers that may want to speak in favor or against the bill. First on my list is Tim Sullivan with Wright-Hennepin Cooperative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership, Senator Rarick, and appreciate the committee giving me time today to testify on the Energy Conservation and Optimization Act, otherwise known as ECO. As the chairman mentioned, I'm Tim Sullivan. I'm president and CEO of Wright-Hennepin Cooperative Electric Association, and we're headquartered in Rockford, Minnesota. We serve most of western Hennepin County and really the vast majority of Wright County, and we're the state's fourth largest electric cooperative. And as this committee knows very well, cooperatives are different in that we're owned by and run for the benefit of those that we serve. Now, we strongly support this bill and believe it's very good policy both for the state, and it's great policy for the 1.7 million electric consumers served by cooperatives in Minnesota. And there are lots of reasons for that. Senator Rarick did a good job of outlining many, but I'll spotlight just three. First, we believe very much that this is good for consumers. As you know, under the current Conservation Improvement Program, or SIP program, the state requires us both to reduce kilowatt hour sales by 1.5%, as well as to spend 1.5% of our revenue on that goal. And just to take that out of the abstract, for Wright-Hennepin, that means we're required every year to reduce kilowatt hour sales by 13 million kilowatt hours, 13 million. And on the spending requirement side, we're required to spend $1.5 million. And for a utility our size, you can see that that would have significant impact on our rates. Now, we also believe it'll reduce consumer costs. I know that's important to this committee. So consider that under the current law, as Senator Rarick said, beneficial electrification technology. So think of things like electric vehicles. Even though they reduce greenhouse gas emissions and total energy costs, two of the goals of the original legislation, we're not allowed to count them under the current legislation. And that's because they actually increase kilowatt hour sales. So they increase kilowatt hour sales, but reduce emissions and total energy costs. And yet, things that were pretty rare back in 2007 when the bill was first passed, things like LEDs and Energy Star appliances, are now extremely commonplace. It's virtually impossible not to buy an Energy Star appliance. So I hope the committee can see how inefficient and counterproductive the current policy is. If we can get just a little bit of flexibility, which this bill grants us, to do things like count the spending for promotion of electric heat pumps and electric water heaters and electric vehicles, it'll reduce costs for everybody. And at a bare minimum, as this committee knows, the bill's own fiscal analysis shows that no new costs will be added. Third, I want to stress the point on competition, since so much opposition is coming from the delivered fuels community, especially propane. We do not have a level playing field now. It is the electric utilities that are under a 1.5% mandate, not the delivered fuels. So to the extent that government has its thumb on the scale now, it's in favor of delivered fuels. And so it does not require any switching. All it allows consumers to do is make the choice around the best energy saving technology that is the best fit for their home or their situation or their business. And we say, let the providers compete, let those consumers make the choices that are the very best for them. So we just encourage this support for the very modest piece of legislation. We know there's a lot of debate and discussion now around what should go on the special session agenda. We would encourage this committee to continue to talk to Senate leaders to bring it to the floor. We believe this is a bipartisan piece of legislation that merits support from both sides of the aisle. And most important, we believe that the state and electric consumers and the environment and our whole energy future will be better if we pass this bill. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Next on my list is Kent Sullum from MMUA. Please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time. I'm Kent Sullum, Government Relations Director for the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. And I literally got involved with this from day one, working with MMUA. Learned a lot about the whole SIP program, and our membership is very excited by the thoughts of ECO being able to get across the finish line. I'm going to touch on a few points. I'll try to avoid duplicating what Tim just said, but addressing some of the concerns that we've heard from the opposition. First of all, I want to point out that this bill is a large bill, but it's not a whole lot of new mandates. We would never support a lot of new mandates on local government. It's just not what we're here about. Probably 99% of that bill is redrafted from current law. We create a separation between the IOUs and the COUs in this bill, which is important because there are major differences between what our business models are, what our business needs are. And so there's a lot of restating of current law that looks new if you just look at a bill. When you look at the existing statutes, you'll see that it isn't new. It's just being restated to create the separation. There's an allegation that there's new taxes being authorized in this bill. I have no idea where that's coming from because, again, we would not support additional taxes on our members. There is a carryover of an appropriation that's, again, authorized under current law and needs to be recognized under both statutes so that the appropriations that are currently there remain in place and commerce can remain whole. The fuel switching is, again, consumer driven. We're simply getting options. Now, there's been concerns or confusion over why we're looking for more options. If we're having hardships, why not just seek waivers? They're two separate ideas. Expanding the program allows us to continue the benefits of the current program, a highly recognized success, and meet the needs as things are changing. But there will still be some areas where a utility may fall short a meeting, even the revised efforts, and will request the waiver from the commissioner's office. This has not been used widely in the past. In fact, I think we're aware of one case. But again, this is a carryover process from existing law. So it's a bill that gives flexibility to utilities, benefits to consumers, creates local jobs because it will be, the technologies involve a lot of local small organizations to do the work. And overall, it's just a great benefit to everybody. And the fuel switching is simply, as Tim mentioned, a balancing of current law where we have the mandates and the other industries do not. That I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Please stay available for questions. We're going to go through our testifiers list, Mr. Sullum, and get back to the testifiers. I just want to make sure we get through everybody and have plenty of time for questions. Next on the list is Derek Moe from MREA. Please announce yourself and begin your testimony, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Energy Committee. I am Derek Moe, the CEO of the Minnesota Rural Electric Association, unifying all 50 of the state's rural electric cooperatives. Reforming the SIP program has been the cooperative's #1 priority for 4 years. Among many important issues, cooperatives prioritize this program due to its impact on the 1.7 million member owners we serve. Each year, cooperatives spend $30 million working to reduce electricity sales under SIP. $30 million annually for cooperatives. Teams of our CEOs from across the state have worked on this priority for years, and we have engaged numerous and diverse stakeholder groups and worked together in a meaningful way to develop a widely supported bill. Most all of those diverse stakeholder groups have joined together and are advocating for the ECO bill and the widely recognized benefits it brings. All the state's cooperatives, the municipal utilities, Kent just spoke, have long time been companions seeking solutions with us on this. Every utility in the state, consumer groups, and a wide range of other stakeholders have done the difficult work to find common ground and bring a bill with broad support. This bill, the resulting ECO bill, is good for rural Minnesota, for all of Minnesota. I'll highlight 2 reasons in particular why this reform is needed. It reduces regulatory regulations and brings regulatory relief in numerous ways, would be the first item. One glaring example that I'll point out is the spending mandate. Under the current program, cooperatives and all utilities must spend at least 1.5% of the revenue on the goal of reducing electricity sales, even if we could achieve those conservation goals with less dollars. That's absurd, and the ECO bill fixes it. Secondly, the thing I would highlight is that it does help to level the playing field by addressing the current ban on fuel switching. As Senator Rarick pointed out, this is not actually the main focus of the bill. It only serves to make a modest reform in this area actually and allow some additional innovation around the edges. However, it's a part of the bill that has resulted in substantial controversy, so I want to mention it briefly. An energy conservation program should focus on that, reducing the total amount of energy used, and that's simply not so with SIP today. Today, the SIP program, by definition, picks winners and losers, banning us from counting energy savings when we cross fuel types, such as energy provided from propane or gasoline instead of electricity. It's time to reset the program from a frame of electricity is bad to actually truly looking at reducing total energy use in a conservation program. The ECO bill takes a modest but important step in going in that direction, allowing up to 1/3 of the cooperative's annual goal to include these innovative new programs that we're actually already trying to do today, but cannot be counted under the existing program. These programs involve new technologies and they are not poised to gobble up any major market share, but they ought to be allowed to compete and to be counted when they're used to enhance consumer choice, to reduce energy use, and save money for consumers. On behalf of the state's cooperatives, I'd like to thank Senator Rarick. He's been an excellent champion on this bill, and Chair Osmick, and the bipartisan group of senators that have been working with us so hard on this issue. While recognizing that there are other challenges to deal with for sure in special session, we ask that you get this bill over the finish line during special session. Rural electric cooperatives deliver power to 85% of the land mass in Minnesota and a third of its residents, working to bring affordable and reliable energy to the homes and businesses we serve across the state. We urge you to reduce the regulatory barriers under the current SIP program and deliver timely reforms by supporting the ECO bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moe. Last on our list is Drew Maratska, XLI. Please announce yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Moratska. I'm a partner at the law firm of Stoll Reeves and greatly appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I have represented clients in over 15 general rate cases, numerous integrated resource plan proceedings, multiple certificate of need proceedings, and myriad miscellaneous dockets before the Public Utilities Commission of Minnesota. In short, I've devoted over 15 years of my practice to representing consumers and project developers on energy matters. Today, I'm here to testify on behalf of the Xcel Large Industrials, or XLI, which is an ad hoc consortium of large industrial end users of electric energy who are also Xcel Energy customers. Together, these large industrial companies consume in excess of 1 billion kilowatt hours annually and pay more than $80 million in electric bills each year. For these members, energy costs amount to 20 to 30% of the overall cost of production. Therefore, cost of energy is a critical concern, and even a seemingly nominal increase may have a huge impact. For example, a 1 penny per increase per kilowatt hour equates to more than a $10 million increase across the group. The Xcel Large Industrials oppose Senate File 4409. But before addressing the content of the bill, I'd like to address the context in which it's being discussed. Given the backdrop of an economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the very real turmoil facing the state, XLI questions whether substantial rate increasing legislation like this that picks winners and losers is consistent with the goals of a special session and appropriate considering the social unrest and economic hardships facing all ratepayers at this time. Gerdau's St. Paul Steel Mill is indefinitely idled. The Verso Paper Mill in Duluth announced this week it is going to indefinitely idle. Many large industrial customers across the state have curtailed operations, resulting in what is hopefully only temporary job loss. But make no mistake, energy costs factor into these decisions. XLI therefore respectfully requests the committee's careful consideration of whether to move this bill forward at this time in Minnesota's history. In addition, XLI raises 3 concerns regarding the content of the bill. First, and starting on page 1, the bill creates an open-ended invitation for the utilities to enter new markets on the backs of ratepayers. To be sure, the term innovative clean technology is defined so broadly that it is actually unclear what doesn't fit within that term. There is not even a requirement that such a technology fit within the provision of energy, only that they be energy related. Nor is there any requirement that the technology actually benefit utility customers. The commission need only find that it is likely to benefit. It is extremely troubling that this committee is evaluating broadening utilities' reach in an unprecedented fashion over the objections and concerns of the rate-paying public. Second, Senate File 4409 substantially overhauls the existing Conservation Improvement Program. If enacted, rather than reducing energy, Senate File 4409 proposes to increase customers' electric energy consumption through efficient fuel switching. By definition, the fuel switching encouraged by the Eco Bill would favor the utility monopolies to the detriment of private industry. It is unclear why this is the preferred policy approach. For example, it's not clear why the legislature believes it is beneficial to eviscerate free market selection of lower cost options. If carbon reduction is the objective, it is also unclear whether there aren't more cost-effective means of achieving that carbon reduction. And finally, it appears the pursuit may have unintended consequences. For example, it appears that Senate File 4409 encourages fuel switching from propane to natural gas, though propane contains more than twice the energy content of natural gas. Fuel switching in this context would therefore be inefficient. Additionally, because the bill encourages increased electric energy consumption, it also necessitates new utility-owned generating resources. In fact, the Eco Bill explicitly directs public utilities to file a report, quote, on generation capacity increases resulting from efficient fuel switching improvements. That's on page 18. In other words, the Eco Bill recognizes and endorses new generating capacity in response to fuel switching load growth, the cost of which will be passed on to ratepayers. Alternatively stated, this bill will increase electric rates. So to summarize, Senate File 4409 turns decades of regulatory policy on its head by first encouraging utilities to enter new markets and pursue new revenue streams, risk-free and on the backs of ratepayers. Second, renaming energy conservation to mean increased energy consumption. And third, incentivizing new generating capacity. All three of these significant changes will lead to increased rates. In addition, we reiterate that a special session in the midst of a global pandemic, an economic crisis, and a time of immense social and political pressure for reform in meaningful areas is not the appropriate time to pursue this bill. Therefore, XLI respectfully opposes the passage of Senate File 4409 at this time. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Maratska. Are there any other individuals in this meeting that would like to speak for or against this bill before I open it up for additional comments from members and from testifiers? Please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any at this time. I guess.
Dave Wager wants to.
Whoop, hold on a second. I didn't see a hand go up. Did you say Dave Wagner?
He's physically raising his hand.
Wager, I can't find the hand button. I'm sorry.
Mr. Wagner, please state your name for the record. Begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Dave Wager. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Propane Association. I'm here today to defend my continued opposition to fuel switching. It has been acknowledged to me by both Senator Rarick and Senator Osmek that propane is cleaner and cheaper compared to electricity. It would never be the subject of fuel switching. Leaving aside for a minute that logical observation that if propane is irrelevant to the bill, it should not be included in the language, I'll attempt to respond. Nowhere in the bill will you find the phrase cleaner and cheaper, nor will you find an explicit exemption based on a concrete scientific standard such as the Environmental Protection Agency's Energy Star program that gives propane a site ratio of 1.01 and gives grid electricity a site ratio of 2.8, which makes propane almost 3 times more efficient than grid electricity. Therefore, there's no stated exemption for propane in the language of the bill, and we are left in a world of statutory interpretation if we can even get there. What the bill does do is define fuel switching as replacing a fuel, including propane, as specifically defined in the Delete Everything Amendment 4409A-1 dated April 22nd, 2020. Section 4F at page 4, line 17, with electricity delivered at retail by utility. Section 4D at page 3, line 26, and requires the installation of equipment that utilizes electricity, resulting in reduction or elimination of the fuel previously used. Note, I have no, I've eliminated references to natural gas because that is not what I'm here to discuss. There are additional considerations in section 4D, but they're subject to interpretation and disagreement. The bill contains additional fuel switching or efficient fuel switching improvement language. In section 5, subdivision 8, on page 13, 4 criteria are listed. It is unclear to me whether these criteria are to be read on a conjunctive basis or not. However, what is clear is that all the criteria are subject to perception, interpretation, and argument. None of the criteria is based on an established scientific measure or formula. In section 17 of the bill at page 29, line 12 through 27, 3 more criteria are set forth for electric utilities. Again, these criteria are subject to perception, interpretation, or argument. Essentially comes down to the decision maker. If an entity makes a submission to the department that contains a claim of successful deployment of an efficient fuel switching improvement involving propane, the department will decide whether to approve the plan or not. Consider the following situation. A submission, including a claim of successful deployment of effective fuel switching involving propane, has been submitted and approved. Where does that leave the propane industry? Assume we are to try to challenge the decision. This challenge would come after the approval because we would not have been involved in any part of the department review process. We would have to argue for contested case status in the administrative law arena or sue in district court as a plaintiff, carrying the burden of proof. It would be extremely difficult to establish standing because we are not a direct party to the action and or argument related to the effect of the decision on our industry, even though accurate would likely be deemed speculative. Assume, however, that we did prevail and we made it into the court system. Now we must attack the department's decision. At this point, we run into serious barriers. We try to show that the department was seriously wrong in its interpretation and application of the law. Here we run into barrier number 1. It is well-established law that the court grant great deference to the opinion of a department in situations where the department has jurisdiction over the subject matter at issue. This almost always creates an insurmountable obstacle for a plaintiff challenging specific application of law. We could try, like the activists are telling us, to argue because of the criteria written into the statute, propane would never be a subject of a switch, despite the fact that it is one of the statutorily defined fuel switch candidates. This puts us in a position of arguing because of the other language in the statute, the inclusion of propane is meaningless. It is well-settled law that the court will do whatever possible to avoid making a finding that a legislative enactment or any portion thereof is meaningless. If the words are there, the court will be extremely adverse to avoiding them. They must mean something. The next argument is that it has been acknowledged that propane is cleaner and cheaper than electricity, and to allow such a fuel switch is contrary to the clear purpose of the legislation and common sense. In these cases, the court always responds that if the legislature wanted to exclude propane, it could have stated so. It might also point out that it appears that the intent of the legislation is to allow certain operations to gain points by default. Lastly, we'd be left arguing that it was acknowledged by all involved, legislators, staff, stakeholders, etc., that this would not affect propane. A judicial response would be, we do not care what people said. We and the department are restricted to what they wrote. Propane is specifically identified as a fuel switching candidate in the legislation. It is not our function to second guess the department's opinion on the effect of the criteria in the situation. The end result, the lawsuit would be dismissed, dirtier, more expensive fuels now being substituted for cleaner, cheaper fuels. Given the inclusion of propane in the language of the bill, the acknowledgement of propane as cleaner and cheaper means nothing within the decision-making process. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
And once again, I will very clearly state, sir, that propane is cleaner, is cheaper, is more environmentally sound, and would not qualify under the SIP program. So the vast majority of your arguments, sir, are irrelevant. Senator St. John. Senator St. John, you are on mute.
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Wagner, just a follow-up question, and I'm going to dumb it way down. So my son-in-law and daughter live on a 6 acres just west of Racine, Minnesota, an old house. They're middle class or lower. Propane furnace, propane water heater. Is your concern that if their furnace or their water heater goes out, that they might switch to an electrical water heater or an electrical furnace, given the fact that to do that, they're going to have to, frankly, rebuild their whole electrical service in their house? I cannot imagine that happening or them doing that. But is that your fear?
Mr. Wager?
That is my concern. And I think it's, I know it's a legitimate concern. They're going to be incentivized to do this by the electric utilities, but it's going to be at a greater cost. To have a heat pump, an air source heat pump, you need to have a furnace to operate it, and so on and so on. And we could go through all the details of that, but I keep hearing that this is irrelevant. It's not going to affect our industry. Yet the heels are dug into the sand, and there is absolutely no room to remove this fuel switching element.
Senator St. John?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Wagner, everybody's different. I just can't imagine, and these are just regular average people that, have jobs and go to work every day. I can't imagine that they would get into a fuel switching situation where if the water heater went out, if the furnace went out, they would replace it with propane. And I think the vast majority of people across Minnesota would do that. I just cannot imagine going through all the effort, the hassle, if you will, of putting in an electrical service to service either an electrical furnace or a water heater. The incentive from the electrical company would have to be huge, and I don't think it's going to be that big. So that's my thoughts anyway.
Well, Senator St. John, and just a comment in response to that. The whole point of this bill is to make compliance with SIP easier and more functional for the electric utilities. If somebody moved from propane to electric, because it does not meet the criteria of SIP, it wouldn't be counted. Therefore, any incentive that would be put into place to switch is not going to result in any counting towards the SIP goals of the munis, the co-ops, Xcel Energy, or whoever else is underneath the guise of SIP. It would not qualify to be counted. That's why I get so frustrated with this situation that if the utility, let's say that the Wright-Hennepin had a program that said, we will give you rebates on putting in a water heater. Well, they may be using that, but they don't get to count it on their SIP goals and their SIP program. So therefore, they're doing it out of their own utility focus on this is what they want to do. But it doesn't count on the SIP program. And that's what makes me so frustrated through this, Senator St. John, is that if you're incentivizing it, we see all the time. Please replace your old 20-year-old central air unit with a new, cleaner, efficient one. That would qualify for the SIP program to be counted because you're replacing something that is old with a more efficient brand or a more efficient model. But like you said, Senator St. John, it makes no financial sense, first, on those comments. Second, it doesn't count towards their SIP goals. So if it doesn't count towards their SIP goals, what's the point? So, Senator St. John, further comment?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Further comments from members? Members, we did have a letter that came into us from the chamber. I would like to point out, and I believe that you did get a copy of the chamber's energy policy, 2020 energy policy, which I think is rather interesting that it says it supports and promotes energy efficiency opportunities, including SIP. However, now they send us a letter that pretty much contradicts what they actually say in their literature. So I'm not sure how to quite read that. Senator Rosen, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Please be hands-free. I can tell you're driving.
Yeah, I was trying. I guess I would like to hear from Senator Rarick on the allegations from Mr. Wagner. I tried sincerely, Mr. Wagner, to follow the line of reasoning on your opposition, and a simple mind, I could not follow it. And so I too am a little frustrated on this opposition when Senator Rarick has clearly reached out many, many times to figure out what can happen to not placate, but you know, to get the propane industry involved, actually excluding propane in the bill, and his response to this.
So Senator Rarick, comments and response to some of the testimony we've heard?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, yeah, I have been reaching out to many of the opposition groups asking for language that they would recommend. And to this date, I still haven't really received any. In regards to the, should we just take propane out? I've addressed that a number of times with the groups. The definition, the only place propane is actually mentioned is in the definition of fuel. And that is a definition that came based on where fuel was defined or referenced in other places in state statute. And I went back through and I found many places, and I know I've heard others say that, well, other times in legislation we'll just take something out. It can be different in different places of statute. That's not something that I agree with. And I'm not. If it's a fuel, it's a fuel. And I think part of it, like I mentioned earlier, is what gets lost in this is propane can actually be considered to be used and count as part of the electric utilities SIP program. And I don't know, maybe that should be removed, I guess, but I don't think the co-ops want that because they're looking for flexibility to meet the standards. And the idea of this bill, it was referenced that it's going to increase electric usage. And it may do that, but in general, then it reduces the amount of energy used because it cannot count towards this program unless it reduces energy use. That's something that, it was put in there. It has to be cleaner, lower emissions. It has to cost less. And again, in order for it to be part of this program, it has to go towards reducing energy.
I think we lost Senator Rarick. So while he gets back, I agree with what he's saying. If the goal of the SIP program, and frankly, I mean, if we want to add some groups to the SIP program, I'm about ready to do it. If we want to actually tell industries such as Flint Hills or propane that you have to reduce the amount of sales of your product by 1.5% or whatever percentage we have on an annual basis, I'm sure that those industries don't want to be part of this program because that's what the goal of SIP is reduce energy usage by conservation, to sell less product, because that's the way energy is right now. We bill energy is based upon the usage that takes place. And the commentary that's made that says that this is going to increase rates. Well, actually, the reality of the situation is far more true, that it's going to reduce the costs for us to build additional energy resources and additional energy output facilities, that being power plants, which are expensive as hell, and go onto your rates immediately. And I know Xcel Energy, and I'm sure munis and co-ops would love to build things because they actually get percentages back to their shareholders by building things and building lines, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't necessarily get it more by producing more energy. Their shareholders get far more benefit off of building facilities. So, and additionally, to tie the hands tightly, and believe me, I don't trust necessarily PUC all that much, particularly based upon the configuration that they have right now politically. But the fact of the matter is, we are dealing with the Public Utilities Commission as it exists today. We cannot write legislation to the point of telling them, thou shalt have cookies and milk for dinner, and thou shalt do everything by every syllable of what we say. That is not the way we write legislation. We write it open for at least some level of interpretation. And to say that we're supposed to make our statutes bulletproof in court is absolutely impossible, and is also irresponsible to even ask. We have to make the guidelines as close to what we want as a legislature under the realism of where we are in our energy economy, so to speak. Our Senator Rarick, are you back? No, we still lost him. Additional comments from members? Senator Matthews. I'll come back to you, Senator Sanjum. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I spoke my concerns on this on our first meeting. I still have those concerns. There's still controversial parts in here that we haven't gotten worked out between various sides on the bill. I think we do need to do more work on that. There are offers that are being put out, that are being offered. We just don't have the two sides seeing eye to eye. I do think that we should give consideration to carving out propane if they're not going to be impacted anyways, as is often said. But I heard advocates that were saying they probably will be using it and they want to count that switching. So I know there's lots of concerns on this. I still have concerns and opposition on this, but I want to thank Senator Rarick for continuing the discussion on it. I hope we can keep trying to work towards something here, and I'll keep working with both sides as well. I did talk with one of my co-op people, and I won't say which one, but when we were going over this bill before, he asked me to support the bill. We were talking about this. We talked back and forth on concerns I had with it, and I did ask him, said, so if this doesn't pass, where are you going to be at? Are you going to be in a difficult situation? I know that the measurements and the expanding what they can count is something that they're interested in. But I asked him specifically, like, if this doesn't pass, where are you going to be at? And he said, frankly, Senator, we'll be fine. So I know not everyone may be in the same position with that, but I do think that perspective needs to be included in here, and it's not all the one side necessarily. So I want to thank you for this. Thank you for the discussion. And, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Senator Matthews. And I think Senator Rarick is on the line again. I think Senator Rarick and myself have been trying to find where we can get some commonality, but I think also there needs to be some flexibility from, the munis and co-ops are trying to deal with, honestly, I wonder if the SIP should be involved anyway. They should be doing this on their own without government intervention. That's a position that I think some members of the other body are taking. That being said, we're dealing with a situation we exist in right now. And there has to be some level of willingness to talk through changes from people who are against this to see what we can do to make it better. And I know Senator Rarick, and in fact, he's on the line. Senator Rarick, continue with what you were talking about. But while you were gone, I had some comments sort of amplifying where you were going. But I know you've been working to try and get some accommodations, but also we cannot gut the bill for carve outs, and it becomes very problematic. So Senator Rarick.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's a good case for improving our rural broadband here. So, like I said, I have been trying and asking for language to help ease people's minds. I believe from where we were last year to this year, we made some changes to the bill that, in my opinion, should have given that ease of mind in making sure that things, any fuel switching would have to be cost effective, lower emissions, and also be cheaper in the long run for the customer. And I think I want to reiterate, I guess, and clarify, I made a little mistake in what I stated. Right now, under the fuel switching, it's not counted. But if this bill passes, you could actually count switching from an electric water heater to a propane water heater if, in fact, all these calculations prove out. That could be counted as an electric utilities SIP program because of the fact that propane is cheaper and it is cleaner. They could actually switch from electric to propane, and that would count towards their SIP. And I think that's being lost in all of this. So, and I've repeatedly heard people talking about this is going to increase rates. The vast majority of the XLI companies have opted out of SIP. They are not impacted by this. And we have other ratepayer groups that have signed on to this because of some of the changes we made. Did we have some ways for electric utilities to spend money in this originally? Yes, we did. And we heard those concerns and we took them out, and the electric utility said they will work around it and they'll deal with that. And in regards to why is this the right time? This has been being worked on for 4 years. So the fact that I get it, we have some major things that we're working on right now, but that doesn't mean our work on everything else stops. We as a legislature have to still continue to work on things that have been being worked on for years and years and years. We can't just stop everything until this is settled. So, I will continue to work, and I've appreciated, I did catch some of Senator Matthews' comments when I got on the phone, and I've appreciated his office is right next to mine, and we have communicated, and I have listened to his concerns, and I try to come to him with any ideas I can. And I will continue to do that. And I continue to do that with all the groups. But, I do believe that, right, in the long run, this bill is very, very close, if not ready to be passed. I think the concerns that have been brought up, in my opinion, we've addressed the concerns, and I'm willing to go a little further, but yet we can't jeopardize all the work that's been done to this point and concessions that have been made by so many for some things that are, I think, continue to be portrayed in a little bit of a fashion that is beyond what is true.
Senator Senjum, you had additional comment, and then Senator Simonson.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass it this time. Might come back.
Okay. Senator Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions for Senator Rarick, probably, just so everybody's clear in terms of what you're going to introduce in the special session. You've got the underlying bill left over from last session, which we amended. I assume that'll be the basis of your bill. And then are you going to include the amendment that you had prepared at the end of the regular session? Is that kind of going to be the framework of the bill you're going to introduce tomorrow?
Senator Rarick.
Mr. Chair, Senator Simonson, yes, the DE language that we accepted in committee, like I said, unfortunately, that never became engrossed because we didn't go to the Rules Committee, but it is that language with the amendment language that I had prepared for the Senate floor in regards to naming stakeholder groups that the Commerce Commissioner would have to include to review any SIP program, any proposals, and then also watching and reporting on the impacts that SIP would have on the delivered fuel industry. That's what will be presented tomorrow.
Senator Simonson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Rarick, do you have that in front of you? You can just walk through those stakeholder groups and just kind of click them off so we know who you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, there are two, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Senator Simonson, there are two groups that are going to be called out. One is going to be a group that will represent the ratepayers, and then another one is the delivered fuel industry.
Senator Simonson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Rarick, one last question, just so I'm clear. You've obviously been working with a lot of stakeholders to put this together, but do we have agreement, quote unquote, between the other body and the governor on what you're going to present in special session?
Senator Rarick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe, yes, we do. I've been working very closely with Representative Stevenson, the chief author over in the other body. There have been some proposals that I have pitched to him to try to bring agreement that would have probably lost support of the House and the governor, which is why, sometimes even though it might be something I would like to take on, I haven't been able to. So as it stands, the language with those two amendments is acceptable. I have also been working with the minority caucus in the House. I know there are some concerns, but I believe we have several of their members who are on board and in agreement with this proposed language as well. I know 5 voted for it off the House floor as it was. And I believe from my conversations, we have many more with the 2 amendments that would also join on. So it would have very, very broad bipartisan support.
Senator Simonson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I had.
Okay. Additional comments, members? Senator St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have to go back, if I could, to Mr. Wagner and your comments about it wouldn't count. My thought about how illogical it would be for I think most people, at least most people I know, that to fuel switch from propane to electric. These are mostly rural people, which may or may not matter. But I can't get there in terms of this concern that we have about fuel switching. When to do this, you're going to have to, reconfigure your basement electrically. It doesn't count on the SIP. Just help me a little bit more, Mr. Wagner, about why you think what we think isn't accurate.
Mr. Wager?
Thank you. Well, probably the biggest concern I have is that all of this is going to be measured by a common metric. That's really all it says in the bill. I'd like clear understanding of what that common metric is. To me, there's no goalpost, nothing to drive for, and the goalpost can be moved. There's no clear direction, understanding of anything in this. And I even want to go back to a statement that was made earlier that's a little bit off your question. I can't apologize for not remembering who made the statement, but it was said today that one of the goals is to not build more power plants. Well, to me, this is a load building program for the electrical industry. They're going to increase their load. Where's the electricity going to come from? Right now, natural gas is replacing coal at a ratio of 2 to 1 compared to renewables. And as I stated earlier, it takes about 3 times as much natural gas to make 1 unit of energy in the home as compared to just using propane. And the same holds true for natural gas. If we really want to reduce we really want to do something right for the environment, we should use natural gas and propane right in the home instead of using 3 times more to make electricity to bring it back to the home and use it there.
Mr. Wager, I was the guy who made the comment. The issue is the SIP goal is to reduce the load, reduce the amount of energy that is needed. At the same time, we have more houses, we have more electric users, we have more people. There's going to be a natural increase in the demand, obviously, but through the SIP program, it is to mitigate the need for these additional resources to come onto the grid. That's the goal of SIP. Now, as far as everybody becoming their own energy producer inside of their homes, you could make the case you could do that if you want that right now, because there are generators that you can put in right now, and you could go off the grid. I don't think they're going to be terribly efficient compared to how much your base price is on how you have to purchase it versus and the maintenance you have to do to it, plus the energy you have to put into it. But the bottom line is, on the SIP program, it is to develop program. The whole point of the program is to sell less energy through the grid. And let me say one more thing too about our friends in the other body. Zach Stevenson made a comment on MinnPost saying that the goal is electrification. That is not true. That is 100% not true. If there is a member on this committee that believes that the whole goal of this legislation and the goal of the SIP program in general is to electrify everything, please raise your hand right now and say that you believe this, because I think I can convince Zach Stevenson right now that goats can come down with fairy dust to make electricity too, based upon his inaccurate statement about how this program works. It is not to electrify. It is to incentivize conservation. And I've said this story before, and I'll say it again. I inherited a cabin, and I had the chance replacing an fuel oil furnace to go with electricity or propane, and I chose propane. Why? Because it was more efficient. It cost me less in the long run, even in the short term. That right there would not qualify for the municipals, the munis and co-ops to be counted. If I moved to electric furnace, I would have not qualified for the SIP program. Therefore, it doesn't come into play for where we're going with this. So I know we have a disagreement here, but I'm just basing it on the clear reading of the English language that is in the bill and the goals of the program, which is to reduce energy and reduce electric, even though we still will have an increase in load because there are going to be more people in Minnesota tomorrow than there are today. So, additional comment, Senator Senjum.
I'm way too belaboring this, but I just go back to the human condition. If I tell you what, if I live on propane and my water heater goes out today, I want a new one tomorrow. I don't want to put in an electrical service. I want a new propane water heater tomorrow. Likewise, if it's January 20th and my furnace goes out, I'm not going to put an electrical, heating system into my home. I'm going to get a new propane furnace in there, like hopefully tomorrow. I just don't think, given the human condition and the need to react to emergencies, that people are going to take a big time out and say, well, I've always wanted electric. I'm going to go with no hot water for 4 days and get that service put in, and we're going to go electric. That's not going to happen. It's not real. I just don't believe in this fuel switching thing from the human condition as something that ought to be, terribly concerning. And anybody who wants to argue me out of that, I'm welcome, because I'm listening. I'm just kind of thinking about how I would act if I was in that condition or situation, and I would simply want to replace them tomorrow in both a furnace or a water heater, whatever the case might be.
Thanks, Senator Senjum. Is Mr. Sullivan still on the phone or on the line? Tim Sullivan?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there you are. You know what? I wanted to, you're one of the muni co-ops. I mean, why would you create a program, and why would you, is that your intent, is to create a program that switches people off of propane to electric? And by the way, it wouldn't qualify for the SIP program. So if you're doing a program, why would you create an incentive for something you don't get to claim credit on your SIP scores.
You said it perfectly, Mr. Chair. I think in our view, this will actually, the whole committee has made the point. I think Senator Senja made a terrific point. We actually see very little, maybe no fuel switching, but at least it will allow us, when we're promoting an air source or ground source heat pump or an electric vehicle or something else that's a positive, contributor to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but might increase sales, to count it. That's the point. So it saves money and time and energy from finding a CNI member that we have to go and persuade to do an LED conversion. So that's the issue, because right now, SIP effectively works for us as a tax. It's a 1.5% tax for us with a spending target that we have to meet. Now, if I have existing programs promoting off-peak, water or off-peak heating or off-peak other usage that are also resulting in I at least can count it. So that's really what it is. I'll make a really good point. I really want to identify with both the point you're making, Mr. Chair, and Senator Senjum. I'm troubled as the CEO of a consumer organization when I hear the head of the Propane Association say, stipulate, propane is cleaner and it's cheaper, but we can't possibly trust consumers to make smart decisions. We either have the courage of our convictions or we don't. Now, I believe that in many cases, off-peak electric competes very favorably with propane. But again, our position is simply let the consumer decide. Let Minnesotans determine what is the best fit for them. To Senator Senjum's point, if you were to switch out a propane unit, you'd literally have to, he's right, tear out literally most of your house. You'd probably replace it, if you were on electric, with some combination either of an air or ground source heat pump. And then even then you need some sort of backup fuel source. So, I mean, you were talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. The idea that somehow modest SIP reform will result in massive fuel switching that crushes the propane industry, even though they have a superior product, to me is patently without evidence, either based on what we've done in the past or where this bill is going. I for what it's worth, I salute the committee for its skepticism about that claim. I just think it's without evidence.
Mr. Sullivan, before you go, I want to ask a question on what happens if, and you just brought up that you have to look for places to make your goal.
Right.
Every year you have to make this 1.5%. Every year you have to do this. You have to spend money. And you have a defined service area.
That's
yes,
right.
there are more businesses. There'll be more houses, especially Wright County. You guys, they're paving over a lot of stuff in Wright County right now. But there does come a point where it becomes more and more difficult for you to find that 1.5% that you are legislatively required to do, or you are penalized. And this legislation simply provides some level of flexibility, as well as that organic change that you can count without spending money. Example, if I went and bought a Tesla, don't bring up Representative Garofalo at this point in time, but if I decided to get rid of my Silverado downstairs and get a Tesla, God help me, you would be able to count that just be organically. It wouldn't cost you anything. It wouldn't cost your utility anything. It wouldn't cost your ratepayers anything. It wouldn't cost the people that you report to, which are your stockholders. You wouldn't cost you anything. In that limited amount of activity, you get a benefit without a cost, which is, I think, a great thing.
You said it perfectly, Mr. Chair. And on the first point, what's happening is co-ops have fewer and fewer targets for closing that SIP gap. So traditionally what's happened, if you talk to co-ops across the state, is when the bill first passed in 2011, the biggest revolution was in lighting. And so lighting loads collapsed 90% from the old incandescents or even halide mercury or other different lighting applications to now LEDs. but many of the businesses looking to make those, and that's what we're trying to find when we're hitting a SIP target, is projects that can get us to scale quickly. If I can do 10 or 12 projects versus a very expensive program that only incrementally adds across a residential member, of course I'm going to try to target where I can have big demonstrated kilowatt hour gains, or in this case, reductions, very, very quickly. Now, what's happening is that door is closing. And there's very few new technologies I can deploy that get me to scale quickly. Now, to your point on electric vehicles, is a great example. So electric vehicles will drive up kilowatt hour use, but I want to make very clear on this point. The bill requires total energy use reduction, total energy use. So for those who say it might be load building, therefore it's dirtier, not necessarily, because it's reducing essentially what is delivered fuels in another way, gasoline coming from refineries, which then would presumably producing less because I'm charging now with electric vehicles. That means total energy use. The metric that has often been discussed in the past is essentially a kilowatt hour equivalent, a BTU equivalent, which is something that every utility in the end can solve for. Now, ultimately, that's up to the Department of Commerce and others to decide. But I just really wanted to agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and also with Senator Senjum. We have fewer and fewer opportunities to meet SIP. We really want to meet SIP. We just want to have some flexibility in order to do it.
Thank you. Additional comments from members before I have Senator Rarick close? Thank you, everyone. Senator Rarick, final comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan. You made some very great statements, more eloquently than I am able to make. So I appreciate that. It is, again, this is about conserving energy is what this bill is about. It is, the goal here is not to increase electric consumption. Again, some of these things that we're talking about with load management and such, we will continue to use resources that are there. We're going to be able to use them during off-peak hours, store that energy, and use it during peak times, and count that towards a SIP program, which currently cannot be counted. And that is the major piece of this bill that is going to help our municipals and co-ops meet their goal. And so I hope everybody, really takes a step back and thinks about what the true goal is of this bill and how we're getting there. Again, so a lot of the things around the innovative energy technologies, this is looking at what's coming down the line and what are the things that society is just moving towards, because people want to move towards that. And again, I think the electric vehicle example was a very good one. Our electric co-ops and utilities are not going to be offering incentives to go buy an electric car. They're not going to need to. The people who want to do that are going to. You're going to go through a technical resource plan to determine how much they will be able to count towards their SIP program if somebody within their area does buy an electric car and puts in a charging station at their home. And they'll be able to do that without any cost to the electric co-op or utility at all. It's something that's going to happen organically because that's what people want to do. And so that's what this bill is trying to incorporate and look forward to accomplish. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Senjum, were you waving to talk? I think he was waving at his legislative assistant. Thank you, Senator Rarick. And I know, Senator Rarick, you will, if there is additional piece in the valley that can be made, I know that you will listen. You have through this entire process. I just wanted to end by talking about one thing you just brought up, is that electric charging stations. That is one thing that I know that some industries get concerned about it, and they consider that fuel switching. That if you're driving down, if munis and co-ops decide to put in charging stations at different locations so that that people can charge their cars. Right now, my understanding is you can't use that on the SIP program. This would bring that investment into the SIP program to allow them to count that type of consumer demanded equipment. I mean, that's why the fuel switching has to be included in there, because why, if they're investing, if munis and co-ops are investing in charging stations, why can't they include it on their SIP program? It helps them meet their goal. Does it cost money to put these things in? Yes. But then that makes it so they don't have to chase, as Mr. Sullivan said, chase down to the residential granularity of trying to get people to put in LED lights to try and meet their goal. I mean, there's lots of different things in this fuel switching that are very important that help them and help them with the flexibility that they need. And that's what I appreciate about this bill. So with that, members, we may have a hearing during the special session. I will give you as much notice as possible if that does occur. I don't anticipate it, but there is a possibility of it depending on how much time we have and how long we're here in special session here in St. Paul. So seeing no further activity in front of this committee is adjourned.
Thank you.